Swimming like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Shrimp Tank. We are coming to you virtually from Seattle and the snowy, cold Pacific Northwest. We're in a deep freeze right now, but we're happy to be doing this virtually. Now, listen, if you want to learn how to start, grow, or run a successful business, this right here is the podcast for you. I like to call it the podcast of record. I don't know why, but I do. This is where street smarts and book smarts collide. We took a week off during the Christmas holiday. We are excited to be back. I'm Dan Whedon, and my co-host today is the freshly back from New York City, Michelle Baumberger. Welcome, Michelle. We'll chat in just a second. Our guest today is Craig Swanson. Craig is a digital entrepreneur. You may hear that and say, what does that mean? Well, listen, as a digital entrepreneur, Craig has helped invest in and launch 10 businesses in the last decade. Listen, we can't wait to launch our interview with Craig. So Craig, welcome. We will be chatting with you in just a few minutes as well. So everybody else, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We're, of course, part of iHeartRadio. We are on Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud. You all have your choice of platforms. We're even on YouTube. We are, Michelle, I'm going to throw it to you for a second. What are we?
Ubiquitous.
We are ubiquitous, my new favorite word. Listen, we come to you from about a dozen other cities and growing. In fact, I believe, Michelle, that New York is due to come up sometime in early 2022. We're in Atlanta, which we call the mothership. We're in Boston, Boca Raton, Charleston, South Carolina, and newly minted in Knoxville and Columbus, Ohio. Now, listen, before we bring on Craig, hello, Michelle. Welcome back from New York. And we're the last show of the year.
I know. Can you believe it? 2 days till New Year's, till 2022. Whole new world.
Well, 2 days
right?
till my birthday, by the way. I had to throw that in. I'm a New Year's Eve baby.
You are? I didn't know that. Well, happy early birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it wasn't close. I was supposed to be somewhere in early January, but my mother, she was a good Colombian, and she always wanted to have champagne on New Year's Eve. So since I was going to be cesarean anyway, she said to the doctor, why don't we do this early on New Year's Eve? And that's exactly what happened. So, but I love the date. Hey, listen, everybody nowadays talks about New Year's resolutions, and I'm going to put you on a little Plead the Fifth here, Michelle. Do you have a New Year's resolution, either personally or professionally? And if you do, what is it, or what should it be?
The should be is actually probably the most important. So we have the usual get to the gym, eat better, all those should be's that kind of hit somewhere on the list every year. But really for me, it's about focusing on what's important. And that kind of flows between both business and personal. It's really easy to sort of tackle the urgent, but really percolating up the what's important and being diligent about managing time and managing calendars to get to those things that often just sort of fall to the back burner.
It's funny because important and urgent are two completely different things. Although I think if you're like me, things we they may be important, but we treat them as urgent, or they may not even be important and we treat them as urgent, don't we?
Yep, that's how it works in business. And I think as a founder and CEO, really kind of focusing on what is that and how do you get it up there day in and day out is really important to success.
Well, obviously, our guest has had a lot of success, as I mentioned, especially over the last 10 years. Craig Swanson, welcome. I'm going to bring you into this. Do you have any New Year's resolutions as we head into 2022?
Hey, thanks, Dan. I do, although I didn't know your birthday was New Year's Eve. My family, from my grandfather was a CPA, has always wanted to have a New Year's Eve child because my grandfather was always like, that was always the best tax benefit a child could give. Basically 1 day of child rearing for a full year of tax benefit. And so it's one of those legacy things in my family that we have always wanted a December 31st child somewhere.
Well, at least now you know somebody who was born on December 31, right? You can at least say
that. That's great. Yeah, so for New Year's, I always take the week between Christmas and New Year's and start like writing up goals, looking at last year. So I've just been looking at what we signed up for last year and what we did and didn't do. The big one for me, which I'm kind of taking a step with today, is I've always been the secret weapon inside of a business. I've always like helped build other people's brands, and so I am trying to work on my own public voice. And so I'm trying to set myself up to be a little bit more known instead of just being the guy behind the engine building the engine.
Well, before Michelle asks you a question, I'm going to say there's no better way to start that than being on the Shrimp Tank podcast, Craig. I just have to tell you, you're off to a fast and furious start.
You've already made my 2022, and it's not even here yet.
I love that planning. I mean, I think that it really does, take good, exactly what I talked about, getting the important things, on your radar and focused on that for the new year. So in the intro, Dan mentioned that you've, built a number of companies from a digital entrepreneur perspective over the last years. Can you share a little about what that looks like? What does that mean?
I mean, the short version is I started a service-based business, an IT company, when I was 19, and it took me 20 years and change before that grew up to a place where it could grow itself. And when I started my next company in 2010, the company that became CreativeLive and then other companies I built over time, I really came into every business with the idea that I wanted to build it so that I was not a necessary part of the business, to basically help partner with people that had huge brands, something to share, and we could basically build digital businesses around them to help like expand their reach and build it in such a way that it can scale. And I believe that if something a business is built to scale properly, the weight on the entrepreneur, the business owner, should become lighter as the business scales as opposed to heavier if it's built properly.
So, we hear the word brand, and that has somewhat become ubiquitous, just like Pivot did during the pandemic. And, when you're talking about the brand of a company, it's more than merely reputation. I have to think, and I guess you can see where my question is going, but the brand is worth its weight in gold. And, in the old days, I'm going to date myself here, while brand was important, the assets were different. They were more tangible, it seemed like, and financial. Today, brand is you can actually quantify it, and it's a tremendous asset for a company, isn't it? Regardless of the size.
Absolutely. And I tend to partner with people that have a very strong personal brand in niches. So they're like the major influence in their niche. So the company that I helped launch last year, that's probably my biggest focus this year, is a company called KaisaFit. And Kaisa is an online fitness leader and influencer. When we met, she had 870,000 followers on Instagram. It's grown to over 1 million now. She's one of those people that basically other brands hire to basically help promote their materials. And what we've done is we've built a digital company underneath her brand that basically lets her really extend her reach and like serve more people.
So when you say digital entrepreneur, it's taking something that you feel or the market feels has potential because it's already out there in some way, but then building some infrastructure behind it, underneath it to grow. So what does that look like?
So in general, I tend to partner with really creative people, really creative partners that have a really strong brand and have a large following already. And they need some type of additional support for them to really be able to build a scalable business around what they teach or what they coach or what they basically bring online. So and that can be everywhere from basically the filming, the back-end infrastructure, to the money, or even just the entrepreneurial mindset to create something that can grow beyond them. A lot of influencers, a lot of creative people tend to have a hard time managing staff, managing team, building something that can expand beyond them without them, especially if their name is part of that brand. And so basically, I'm kind of that back-end engine that helps them multiply themselves.
Well, I think that goes to what you were saying previously, is that, one of the things that you learned early on is, how do we make this business not about me? Yet these individuals, I mean, it almost is essential for it to be about them. So that's a pretty interesting, connection between your learning and kind of where you are now and supporting these folks.
Absolutely. It's kind of amazing when someone can have that big of an impact and have that many people following them. And it is hard to take celebrity and be able to translate it into something where they can still live as individuals and be able to have the freedom as opposed to feeling trapped by it.
So I have two questions, Craig. Number one is, it sounds like you're coming in on a consultative basis. You don't have any skin in the game, so to speak, with the business itself. You're coming in as a partner in this in a consultative basis. That's my first question. And then the second goes off of something you said, where they already have a community, a following that has some, I guess, heft to it. Where does that usually start? Where do you start kind of defining that?
So first of all, actually, I don't work as a consultant. Ironically, I am not hireable. Generally, when I come into a relationship, I bring money and team into the relationship as opposed to being hired.
Gotcha.
And so effectively, what we end up doing is creating a company that is a joint company between us, where we build it together, own it together, and try to build it to become as big and impactful as possible. And in terms of like where do you get started? How do you get there? Honestly, I don't know. I don't know how to get from 0 to 1. I'm realizing this. I don't know how to get businesses to a certain level other than just grinding it out. So I tend to partner with people that have had their first initial impact in the audience. If they've started to attract some audience, maybe they're doing somewhere between $150,000 to $250,000 a year in some type of digital goods, and they really want to scale that up. They want to scale that up past $1 million, and then aspirationally far beyond that.
Quick question, Michelle. I just want to have a quick follow-up. Digital goods, can you define that?
For Michelle, for me. So digital goods.
No, I'm asking you. I tell Michelle, I'm taking her question really quickly. Define digital goods. I'm guessing products for sure, but that could also mean services, teaching, coaching, professional services.
I was going to say, ironically, Michelle's my lawyer, so I ask her this question more often than. So digital goods is pretty much, a lot of it is online training, PDFs, online membership sites, effectively things that can be delivered entirely over electronics. So like Netflix is an all digital goods company that is selling a membership. Masterclass sells courses online, these types of things. Community-based education is really a core thing that I'm involved in.
I imagine the last couple of years has been just a boon for so many of these folks as we've all sort of shifted to all things online. But I was going to ask you mentioned earlier when we were talking about a recent success story. Could you share a little bit about what that, kind of where you started and where you took that to success?
Well, absolutely. So it's interesting. I could share the success, but I think actually the learning comes from the failure. So the success is one of the digital companies that we helped really build, which is called Sue Bryce Education. It's an online photography education class for portrait artists, and it's amazing. About 8,000 portrait photographers are part of this community. Was just acquired in April of this year by the largest trade show company in the United States. And it was, I don't think we're allowed to say how much it was, but it was like it was just breaking 8 figures in terms of the acquisition. And so that was 2021. In 2019, we were actually going through a acquisition process where we failed due diligence. So we actually had the experience of having a company want to acquire us, go through due diligence, and then we failed that. We basically didn't pass the process. And what we got out of that was a huge checklist of all the things we were not doing correctly in terms of building our business. So we had a chance to basically go back in and rebuild from the ground zero. So 2020 was a rebuilding year. And it was really good timing because, as you said, 2021 has been a transformative year for online education. It's been a record-breaking year. Pretty much every business I'm involved in had record numbers last year during the pandemic because everyone was forced to move to digital in some fashion. And oddly, this year, the entire world has come online in this space. And so it's a much different space than it was. It's almost like in the last year, this whole industry has grown probably about 10 years of expertise overall.
Well, I can't believe how time's flying. We have to take our first break, Craig. Got to pay the bills. We're going to take that short break to hear from today's Spotlight sponsor. And when we come back with our guest, Craig Swanson, for our Hot or Not section of the show, we're going to ask him a little bit about home studios. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Your business is a valuable achievement, your livelihood, and your legacy. Every day, you're asked to balance business opportunities and legal risk, but engaging legal adds complexity and expense. You deserve to experience business law the way it should be: practical, responsive, approachable, and transparent legal solutions to support your business in every stage. With Equinox Business Law Group's General Counsel Services, you get a corporate legal department tailored to your business needs. Let us tackle those contracts, HR, partnerships, and IP issues so you can get back to your most important work, seamlessly moving your business forward. To learn more about Equinox's fixed cost, all-inclusive legal services, visit our website at equinox.law or email contact@equinoxbusinesslaw.com. Equinox Business Law Group, business law the way it should be.
Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm Michelle Bomberger, here with Dan Whedon, our co-hosts. Our guest today is Craig Swanson, founder of CreativeLive. So let's kick off our next segment, Hot or Not.
All right, Craig, this is Hot or Not, and it's where Michelle and I pepper you with questions about business, about life, about a whole bunch of things. And since Michelle knows you very well, you might be a little bit nervous about what she might ask, but I'll be pushover. At the end, unfortunately, you win absolutely nothing, but we're going to hope you have some fun. I mentioned something about studios, and so many people obviously are using microphones and lighting and all of that. In fact, Craig, you can't make this up. I was on taking a continuing education class. The speaker had a virtual background, and all of a sudden an actual ostrich showed up, which led me to ask the question, where in the hell are you? What is going on that an ostrich shows up? But beside the point, I guess, hot or not, formal studio, or is it home studio for video and audio hot?
Oh, home studio. Home studio is so great. You wake up and you're already where you need to be. We have an extra bedroom that we've converted into our home studio, and I love it.
For those people who might be, I gotta get me one of those. Well, if they have a home, they're off to a good start. But we know, and for those who are watching this on Facebook and on YouTube, you've got a microphone. I've got a microphone. Michelle does. The audio and video equipment is worth investing in, isn't it?
Yes. Here's the tricky thing. I think doing it is what's worth doing. So a lot of people can let the audio gear and the video gear keep them from starting. So generally, people don't even know what to do with the right gear until they've started, and then they can correct the gear easily. You can't correct your start. In other words, you can't. If you're not starting, it doesn't matter what you own.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Great point.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good observation, I think, as people are thinking about how do I enter the digital space? Well, I don't have. Well, you have one of these little cameras that attaches to your computer. Maybe it's enough.
Yeah,
maybe it's not.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So, I'm going to go back to something we talked about earlier, and this idea of personal versus corporate. So this idea of personal branding versus corporate branding, which one is hotter? I know you're not a brand guy, but you see it in your space.
Personal branding is absolutely the hottest in the space that I'm in. I would say corporate branding that can incorporate personal mission, that creates space for personal mission, is probably what really excites me the most, is when there's that connection between the corporate focus and the personal focus. I'm a huge believer in mission-driven brands. But yeah, hot for personal brands.
So this is a question I've asked several of our clients. I'm always intrigued to know, because I think it's a really interesting question. Which one is hotter, Craig, for an entrepreneur? Book smarts or street smarts?
So here's the thing. So street starts, totally. I actually work with a lot of entrepreneurs that I call like there's this desire for people to do performative entrepreneurism, which is they want to look like they're being good entrepreneurs, and that is all about appearance. Like they want to look like they're good marketers. And I would rather have a company that is messy and engaging with an audience and making money than one that looks completely dialed in and has beautiful books and just is creating no energy in the market whatsoever.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and I love that because part of my connection with Craig is through Entrepreneurs Organization, and he's one of the coaches for the EO Accelerator Program, which is businesses that are in the $250,000 to $1 million space. And a lot of what that program is about is kind of providing some of that book smart to support something that maybe has already gotten some traction on the street smarts side of it. So in those interactions, you probably see a little bit of both.
I tend to think of book smarts as a multiplier on street smarts. So if you've got 0 street smarts, you can multiply 0 and get nothing. But if you've got some really strong street smarts, adding some book smarts can really multiply what you can create.
So you're in the digital space,
Mhm.
and I'm an entrepreneur, and I run my own business. So I'm curious, hot or not, digital advertising or pay-per-click, Google ads, that sort of space, what does that look like today?
It's a mess this year. I would say not hot. I mean, I wish we could go back a couple of years. This year has been really hard for digital advertising.
Why? I'm curious that you just that's this first I've heard that. Obviously, I don't run in that space, but why?
I mean, there's a lot of change happening. There's a lot of change happening. The change with Apple and iOS and privacy, and also just all of society being impacted by social media and companies coming under scrutiny from Congress. Everybody is trying to figure out what the right balance is with social media and privacy. And some of the biggest companies, Facebook and others, are under great scrutiny and great pressure. And it just, along with the pandemic and everything else, is just upending every rule that we had in place. So we are all kind of like discovering afresh what works and what doesn't.
Interesting.
Mhm.
So listen, I'm going to dial away a little bit from hot or not, because in the first segment, I'm learning stuff. This is what I love about this podcast is I thought I knew you, but I didn't. Now I know you a little bit better about your business model. And I find it intriguing when you say, no, I'm not a consultant. I bring money to the table. I partner and we do. That leads me to believe that you've got to have a capacity. I mean, I would think that Craig Swanson, as we were talking about time management and all of that, you have to have some level of capacity where you say, I either have room to do this with somebody else, or you know what, I'm booked for 2022. How does that work? Take us behind the curtain a little bit on that.
In general, I am usually working with 3 companies at 3 different stages of development at a given time. So I am usually working with a company that we are in the early stages of prototyping and basically just basically getting into early phase, something that's going to work. We are in a growth phase with another company that's basically proven out its market fit, and I'm building a team and mentoring a team on how to run that company. And then we're usually in a more mature stage with a third company that is on that growth stage of like 100 million, or it's going to be 1 million to 10 million. And that's where we're trying to build out systems that can grow without any of the original founders necessary. So it could be sold. So we just sold one of those companies, Sue Bryce Education, who just was acquired at the beginning of this year. I'm in the middle of growing one of those second companies, KaisaFit, and I've got room for one more that's kind of in a launch stage right now. But generally, I'm always juggling between 3 at 3 different levels of development, which, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, what I think is just fascinating, just from the outside looking in, is that each one of those is at a different stage. So it's almost like it's boredom proof. You're not doing the same thing for everybody. You're at a different stage for each. One goes away, that kind of opens up and it seems like to me, the variety, the just where the stages of it probably keeps it really fun.
It actually, and it helps too, because one of the things for me, so there are different types of small business owners. I am definitely a creator. I need to create, I need to be inventing things. And if I have one company cannot consume the amount of creation that I want to create. And so for me, having side businesses is a way of protecting my core business from having to be changed constantly because of my needs as an owner. And honestly, when I'm coaching small business owners in the accelerator program, one of the biggest challenges I see is business owners forcing their business to take their total creative output and shove it into this business that doesn't need it, when what that business wants is to be stabilized, have a simple product that can basically multiply. And instead, business owners are constantly trying to shove all of themselves into one entity. And especially if they are a creator type, that one entity generally cannot hold all of them.
I know when we talk about, we talk to clients about bringing on investors and bringing on partners and those relationships. One of the, I think, critical things is finding people who complement what you have as a founder. So someone who can provide that kind of outsider's view and who also brings other experiences, other people to the table. So, it feels like, you've got a little bit of both in that perspective, from the experience, from the team, and from just sort of the personal insights of bringing that to the table. So I find that really, really interesting. And I imagine that you learn from every one of these experiences something new. So is there something that you would say you picked up from one client that maybe kind of carries forward to everybody that you work with, learning or a tendency that you might want to share?
I mean, there are a lot, but I would say, so there is this combination of being able to make really huge impact in the world from an education or like community involvement, which really for me involves two things. And this came from really early work I was doing with Sue Bryce and a lot of the early things we were launching, which is a combination of having something that is very superficial that we can have our audience take action on, basically teaching very, very superficial action and combining it with deep underlying mission and purpose. Because I think when you combine superficial, simple, repeatable actions with an underlying mission and purpose, those two in combination can have great impact. And I think people tend to focus on one or the other. They tend to just focus on something that is just superficial and repeatable with no underlying mission, and then you're just on a treadmill running your whole life. Or they focus so much on mission and purpose that they're kind of floating in the sky and they're kind of disconnected from reality. And so this idea of basically being able to teach tangible, repeatable stuff with a deeper mission, I think is huge. I don't know if that was a little bit, that doesn't feel as tangible. I could give examples of that, but like what that comes down to is, for me, the best learning environments always involve emotion. The best community we create always involves emotion. It involves the tactical strategies of life, but it has to involve the emotion. Otherwise, it's not going to connect the dots and people are not going to use it in their life.
I would add to that. I mean, I think even from a larger business, a more traditional company, we hear constantly how disengaged employees are. And a lot of that, I think, is, the assumption, if there is a vision, if there is a mission, if there is an impact, that the assumption that everyone knows that. And so it's not necessarily brought forward on a regular basis for people to hear. And I think I wish I could tell you who said it, but this idea that no one's ever going to get tired of you. They will get tired of you saying your mission statement over and over and over and over and over again, but they're not going to fault you for it, right? So you can't say it too many times. And so if you've got that impact and that emotion, keeping it front and center around and behind all of the tactical is, I think, prudent for any size company.
Yeah.
I'm curious, just in listening to you talk about, what you've done in the companies you've worked with, how have you found your partners? It seems like that's not an easy thing to do. And maybe sometimes it's luck, or it's just, how have you found the partners that you've partnered with?
I mean, it is a bit of a challenge. I basically do one deal a year. And so I haven't really figured out what my internal pipeline looks like. The short version is, I effectively am coaching and providing support and just helping people on any level I can whenever I can. So within EO Accelerator, other friends, pretty much everyone I've worked with knows that they can call and book some coaching time with me, and I will help them at whatever stage they are in their business. I don't do that as a business. I just do that because I really enjoy it, and I've got a lot of free time, and that keeps me in the space. And so when through referrals and through people referring others, that I get introduced to people, and when it clicks and they've got something where simply my advice from the outside is not enough to help them grow, but really they want me on the inside to really help build this with them, that's where it evolves, and we come in and become partners.
Well, Michelle, I can't.
Oh, I think you're muted.
How did I do that? I don't know how I muted myself. That I don't recall that, but oh, you know what? I was pulling something up. I must have hit mute on that. Sorry about that. Michelle, what I was trying to say was, I can't believe it. We got to go to break. So we're going to take our second short break to hear from our sponsors. And when we come back with our guest, Craig Swanson, for our famous Plead the Fifth section of the show, we're going to ask Craig about the biggest mistake he's ever made. You won't want to miss it. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Plead the Fifth is brought to you by our corporate sponsors: Ideal Life 360, Cornerstone Financial, First Underwriters Insurance, the Kids Up Sun newspaper, BC Fitness Studio, and Upstart Group. Please visit our website at www.shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle to learn more about these terrific companies. Now back to the show.
Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest business leaders in the greater Puget Sound and beyond. I'm co-host Michelle Bomberger here with Dan Wheaton, and our guest today is Craig Swanson. We're going to now kick off Plead the Fifth.
And Plead the Fifth, Craig, is where Michelle and and you, I know that Michelle's your attorney. I don't know if you can text her on the side and say, should I plead the fifth? But you do get one. Actually, she's the one again to worry about. You can plead the fifth once, but only once. And at the end, you win absolutely nothing. So, you know, we've all heard that if you're not failing, you're not trying. And we probably all would agree that some of the best lessons in life we've got was from failing. But I've got to ask you, in your entrepreneurial life, what's the biggest mistake you made?
All right. So in the spirit of the question, I don't look at life like that. I genuinely have a hard time finding, but one tactical mistake I made a mistake that involved about $2 million of stock vesting that I misread a agreement for, that basically put $2 million of vesting stock at risk or out of play. And it was like the biggest amount that I had ever lost in one decision. And it was just devastating. And it also led to other learning. But I will say, my favorite quote around mistakes, and the one I would like to adopt for myself, is something I heard from an entrepreneur, and I've been able to track it down. But basically, when asked that question, his answer is always, what's my biggest mistake? I am working on it right now. It is going to be spectacular.
I've never heard. I love that. I'm working on it right now.
So you mentioned your first business at 19. I don't think
Yeah.
you shared what that was. What business was it?
I started an IT company supporting graphic designers, ad agencies, and design firms on the then budding Macintosh computers that were just coming out. And that's the business I ran for 20, 25 years, and eventually sold it. But effectively, at 19, no one had any more experience than I did in that area. And my timing and everything else was just perfect. And basically, I dropped out of high school and college consecutively to start this business that became the thing I did for the next 2 decades of my life, and basically where I learned just so much about life.
So I don't know about you. I enjoy books, and there's obviously many impactful books in my life. What for you? What was maybe one or two of the most impactful books that you've read?
Well, so I would have to say, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is one of those seminal books that for me. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad's huge. The Millionaire Next Door was huge for mindset. I would say for running a service-based business and just kind of mentality around this. Trusted Advisor by David Maister, I think, is an absolutely fantastic one, as well as Running the Professional Service Firm by David Maister. Both of those are really excellent books.
Good.
I'm going to follow that up with something similar. You're in the digital space. So what are your favorite podcasts for business?
Oh my goodness. The Shrimp Tank. Absolutely.
I was actually holding my breath. I was actually holding my breath. I can breathe again now.
So I'm looking on my phone. So I subscribe to about 180 podcasts. I am very much a podcast listener. I'm trying to, you know what? I'm kind of like running a blank because I've got so many in front of me. There's a really great one on startups that I can't remember the name, but it is we can link to them. I can give you my top 10 list, but I can't pull any off the top of my head right now.
All right, well, maybe we can publish the top 10 list as part of our notes.
Yeah, I absolutely.
Yeah.
So do you have that's not business related that you it's just it's a favorite of yours? I could be just about anything. What do you like that's not related to business?
So I listen to a couple just nerd-based podcasts. So The Incomparable is my favorite nerd-based podcast station, and they have a great D&D program that I listen to for most of the pandemic. I've just been listening to people play Dungeons and Dragons. I don't play Dungeons and Dragons, but I just love the storytelling and listening to people just talk. Mm-hmm.
That's actually awesome. I think that sounds like a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been asking this question of all of our guests this year. I think we're going to compile them at the end, and we started this in May, so we have a few more months. But let's say, you got a little extra time on your hands and you're going to start a business all on your own, and it's going to be based off a hobby. What is the business? What's the hobby?
Really honest, this is the question I've been kind of nervous about the entire time. I even talked to my family about it last night. I don't really have a lot of hobbies, and since I work in education, a lot of things that I'm interested in turn into businesses. But I was nervous. I started making, so I've got a list of about 14 ideas in front of me. I'm going to give you a couple.
Okay. I'm really intrigued now.
Yeah. So for travel, we have travel for foodies, we have travel for photographers, for fitness. I would love like a business model travel where basically I get to go and travel to other areas and like explore different business for those of us that are interested in the business size. One of the things I know about me, I love solving problems in Excel. That's not a business thing. My week is happier if I've done a little bit. I love a business called Solve My Excel, marketplace where basically can bring their Excel problems. Experts can come in and like offer their solutions. Maybe it could be run like 99 Designs where for logos, and we just do it for Excel. And then Podcast Party. Right now we can sync Netflix or we can sync Amazon Prime so that everyone can watch their movies together with friends across the space. I'd love to be able to listen to podcasts in unison with other friends if we're in different places so that we can text or kind of be in line with the same podcast we're listening to.
That's pretty. You put some real thought into it. I love that. That last one's kind of cool. The podcast, the pod partiers. That's cool.
So podcastparty.com is available if you want to grab it. Listenparty.com costs $3,000, but it's being sold and available.
You have put some research into this one.
Wow.
You've got something there. So if you could have dinner with anyone, alive or dead, who would you choose?
Richard Feynman, who was a physicist, kind of like second generation. He was very young during the time that they were building the atomic bomb. But Richard Feynman, I love his writings, and I love how he's able to communicate with non-technical people about technical ideas.
So I want to talk a little bit more about virtual learning. And it's interesting. You may not know this about me. I'm about to film my 4th LinkedIn learning course.
Oh, cool.
And I love doing them. They're fun. Unfortunately, I don't get to go to SoCal this year to film it. I'm filming it from my living room, but that's okay. It'll be a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to that. I have seen that explode just within LinkedIn by itself.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds silly to say, I'm sure virtual learning is here to stay, but can you look around the corner and say, this is what virtual learning is going to look like in the next 3, 5, 10 years, especially as it relates to businesses and trainings and things like that?
All right. So the technology is going to change. The technology is going to change. There'll probably be some type of AR, augmented reality. But fundamentally, here's what I believe about online learning and learning of almost any sort. Any piece of information that you teach, sell, or build your business on is available for free with a properly worded Google search. Learning for me is about creating the experience inside of your student's head with the belief that they can do it, and with a connection and a story that helps guide them to want to learn. So people end up getting really fixated on what they teach, but how you teach is so much more important. And the idea of being able to create this sense of desire in your audience and having them drawn forward and wanting to learn something is probably more important in a lot of ways than teaching it the best. Because if you're great at inspiring people to want to learn, they can go fill in the details themselves. But if you're only great at telling them the information is virtually worthless today.
And really, it's not that concept's no different than it always has been. Those people, and you're a teacher, those people who can engage and who bring vulnerability and emotion and empathy, all of those things, they're the ones who are the best at what they do, and because people gravitate towards them. That's really kind of just an ongoing theme, isn't it?
Yeah. Honestly, I think if I were going to be focusing on what I'd love to build over the next 3 years for like online learning, it is a way to allow the other learners to see each other's moment of epiphany. Because when you are sitting in a room with other people who are learning, you often learn more from watching someone else who's learning rather than necessarily processing information yourself. And I think that's the biggest thing we miss unless educators very, very consciously bring it to the front, is the experience of watching other people learn.
It's a really, really important insight, I think. Something that strikes me as you talked about first off, what you do for a living, second off, the number of podcasts that you follow is there a threshold of digital fatigue? I spend most of my day in some format of this, right? And when I look at something like Masterclass, I can't bring myself to do more in front of a screen on a lot of days. So I'm just curious as to whether that's something that's either been research talked about within kind of where we are as a community, and how much online time we're spending.
So first of all, just in terms of overwhelm, I think the biggest thing for me in overwhelm is one of control. So if I have to consume information, that leads to more overwhelm than if I want to consume information. And generally, like for me, I read books. There are things I usually find that are hobbies. I want information. I will say, I think I try to build as much as possible what I call bingeable learning. So where I think Masterclass really like has a lot of this in place, where people can choose to, rather than binging several episodes of the latest Netflix series, they can binge a educational program that is paced in a way that's desired to just let it kind of flow across me and let me learn through watching, rather than feeling like I have to prove that I am assimilating it the way the instructor wants me to assimilate it. And if anything, the biggest thing I fault a lot of online learning for is creating these LMSs, these learning management systems that enforce the instructor's way that they want a student to process their learning.
Interesting. I'd love to learn more about that.
Well, Michelle, I'm going to have you go ahead and ask Craig how people can get a hold of them. And hard to believe the time's just flown by.
Well, Craig, we want to thank you first for just joining us today. Like I said, we know each other, but I learned so much about kind of the way you work, the way you think, and this sort of backdrop around learning, which is really, I think, fascinating. If any of our guests would like to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to reach out?
Probably the best way to reach me is at craigswanson.org. I'm working on that site. It'll be evolving better over time, but it'll have my contact information. And anyone that wants to talk to me can schedule a time to talk with me. And I'll put links on there to the other companies that we're building. And I just want to say also, just thank you for having me on. I've just been like listening to you guys in my ears for the last week. And Dan, it's a pleasure to meet you face to face. And Michelle, I really appreciate, Michelle, everything you've helped be part of my life for the last year.
Yeah, well, like I said, this has been really insightful, and I love to bring on people who come from totally different backgrounds with all these different insights that are valuable for many of us who are trying to find our space online. So for our audience, make sure you check out the replays on shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle and wherever you get your podcasts, iHeart, Google, Spotify, SoundCloud, and make sure to follow our show's social media pages on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
Well, Craig, thank you for having been here and being our guest. Michelle, thank you. Happy New Year to both of you. Everybody, we won't have another show until next year. I know that sounds corny, but our next show will be Wednesday, January 5th, 2022. Our guest is going to be Diane Garcia with Lorraine Consulting. She is based out of Portland. So we're going to head down I-90 a little bit and get to meet somebody out of the Portland area. Linda Popke will be my co-host. In the meantime, please be safe, be well, be prosperous, and have a very happy New Year's. Because until next week and next year, the shrimp is back in the tank. So long.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond, and the